this is Jackie from 3rd period, and I did forensic linguistics as my topic. So basically in this presentation, I'm going to discuss what is and isn't forensic linguistics, some examples of the strategies used, what qualifies as evidence for forensic linguistics, the two fields, and sort of some other big ideas of what forensic linguistics is, as well as an example of a case that has used linguistics. So things that linguistics is not that are commonly believed by a lot of people. It's not the study of foreign language. A lot of people believe that it has something to do with language. In that sort of field, it has nothing to do with a speaker of many languages or the study of dead languages. Just pretty much anything to do with broad generalization of language isn't really classified as forensic linguistics. And it has to do with sort of analyzing handwriting and grammar. And relating the two things, but it has less to do with the actual physical handwriting and more to do with the grammar, punctuation, and word choice than it does the actual handwriting and writing. That's left up to handwriting analysis. The definition of linguistics is the scientific study of the human language from various perspectives that are oral, nonverbal, or written. So basically just any interaction between people, whether it be those three categories, is classified as linguistics. And then forensic linguistics is applying this idea of linguistics to help solve problems and to help investigators sort of narrow down a case and come up with some solutions. And then the two branches of the field are legal process and linguistic evidence. And I'm going to define this a little bit more concisely. The legal process is analyzing the gathered information during the legal process. So this includes the investigative stage, the trial stage, and the appeal stage. So basically any time a victim, a suspect, any of these types of people are in a courtroom setting, this would be like when they were arrested from the time that they're convicted, anything they do or say in this time, sort of the Miranda right type things, can be held against them in court. So whoever is responsible for analyzing whatever they do or say in these settings is analyzing the legal process of the linguistic field. And so in this sense it's being used as an instrument. And then linguistic evidence is the study of the written and spoken material as an admitted proof. So this is everything that would happen before or during the actual crime, while the other is during the trial, during when they're arrested. This is sort of what happens before and during the crime. So it's based on the analysis of author identification, forensic stylistics, discourse analysis, linguistic dialectology, and forensic phonetics. So this is basically how a person normally speaks, acts, and behaves due to their style, their dialect, and their phonemes. So this is just sort of how a person normally speaks, how a person normally writes. In writing, it can be the punctuation, the grammar they use. In speaking, it can be the normal tone, the normal pitch, the normal excitement they have. And so all of this sort of factors into how a person appears before the judge and whether or not they could be lying or not. And so these are just some examples of that evidence. Emergency calls, ransom demands or threats, suicide letters, death row statements, and alibis can all be used as evidence for coming up with whether or not a person could be lying, a person's alibi is true. So all of these circumstances are used by forensics, linguistics scientists in order to determine some of the causes and evidence for the crime. And so uses of linguistics, it can't be used as sole convicting evidence in a courtroom, though it does provide some really good evidence. You can't really get inside someone's head knowing absolutely for sure whether or not they're lying and knowing absolutely what they meant behind a statement. So though it can be really, really helpful in proving or disproving alibis and aiding an interrogation, it can't be used as sole evidence for whether or not someone's innocent or guilty. And so these are just some examples of some linguistic scientists that are out in the field right now. Roger Schwei, was consulted in over 500 cases involving taped conversations, interviews, and speeches. He has testified as an expert witness in the U.S. Senate 52 times, so he's a real famous guy out there in the linguistics field who's just really been helpful in solving many crimes. And then Malcolm Coulthard has founded the Institute for American Forensic Linguistics, and he's been an expert witness in the United States and internationally in 150 cases. And then here's just a case that involves linguistics. It's a Chris Coleman case that was in 2009. Chris Coleman was a guy who began receiving death threats directed towards him, his wife, and his children. And so he had reported this to the police. He had actually had a neighbor help him out in setting up some cameras outside his house to see whether or not the person would come over and follow through with the death threats. So he was sort of being cautious there. And then while he was at the gym, a few weeks later, his wife and children were found strangled to death in their two-bedroom home. And then he was determined a suspect of the murder due to the reveal that he was having an affair with a waitress. So this sort of put him on the list for somebody who could have been involved in this crime in some way, knowing he had this motive. And then a guy named Leonard was put as a forensic linguistic investigator on this case. And so what he did was the death threats were written, and so he found examples of Coleman's emails and text messages and related them to these death threats, and found that certain specifications, such as the fact that Coleman in his text messages would use an abbreviation of you, as well as when he said can't and don't, he would put the apostrophe after the T, which was very few people do that because it's grammatically incorrect. So this sort of tagged him as the one who could possibly be the one who had perpetrated the crime. So these things all really factored into his arrest. And so he was eventually found guilty of the crime, even though DNA evidence and no other evidence was left behind. Linguistics was able to convict him and sentence him. And so today we've just learned that linguistics is the application of language to investigation. It can play a key role in alibi, conversation, and document analysis to prove or disprove someone's alibi or truth to a case. And it's an ongoing event even after the crime has happened and the suspect has been convicted. So most other forms of evidence are retrieved after the crime, but they're there from when the crime originally happened. But linguistic evidence can sort of go on through the whole trial process and through interrogation and everything. So it's sort of one of those that's up in the air and ongoing throughout the entire process. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned a lot about linguistics.